So the last project that's somewhat elaborate in this section of the class on Excel VBA, as well as the last project overall really in this class, will be on using Excel VBA to connect to databases, specifically Microsoft Access database. So in order to do that, in order to connect specifically to the loans.accdb access database or database in general, okay, we need to include the tools references Microsoft ActiveX data objects into our Visual Basic project, Visual VBA project really. So as soon as the workbook opens, then what we're going to do, we're going to set the connection string and provider properties and then open the connection. Just before the workbook closes, this is at the bottom of the slide, we're going to close the connection to the database as well. So this is how it ideally works, but in practice, especially as we go and debug the project, the connection to this database will get dropped, and I'll show you how to sort of manage that issue as we go through this. So at this point, let me switch to the VBA project, specifically the place where we left it in a previous video, which is the loan summary worksheet, where we had, among other things, the str path string variable declared locally that now needs to be commented out and then used by copying it from the step 2 here into this workbook and code module behind it, right here into the step 3, right before we set to open the access database. So that's very similar to opening the CSV file in this sense. We have to provide a path to the CSV file, and just like that, we have to provide a path to the local database file for this loans database as well. Now, going back to the point about including Microsoft ActiveX data object reference, you go under Tools, References. I know this is going to look a little tiny. There's no way for me to enlarge this. I already have it included. Mine is Microsoft ActiveX data objects 6.0 library. 6.0 doesn't matter. If you scroll down to Microsoft, which is about here, and under A, letter A, you'll have these ActiveX data objects. Pick the latest one that you can. Okay, then as you have that library loaded automatically into your project, then you can declare the public CON loans as new ADODB.connection object. You know, from which is similar to what we did in our database programming portion of the class with visualbasic.net. As you know from the object-oriented programming section, the keyword new instantiates and declares an object at the same time. The public, just like for the path, is going to represent the fact that this is publicly available throughout the entire project. Okay. As soon as the workbook opens, after we set the path correctly to the folder where the actual database is, we use with CON loans and with construct to set first the connection string property, to, in double quotes, data source equals, make sure you spell it correctly, and str path, again make sure the path is correct as was just discussed, and loans.accdb database. Then the provider property is set to the specific data provider access in this case, which goes like this: Microsoft.ace.oledb.12.0. So ACE stands for access, object linking and embedding databases. Okay, for different providers like Oracle, MySQL, you would use that specific connection string to those guys and specific provider that it needs as well. And then finally, when these two are set correctly, you can go ahead and open the connection. And once you're done with the whole project, once we are done with the whole project, the connection loans will be closed. Okay, so this is how, again, it works ideally. In practice, this connection here is going to get dropped more than once as we debug through this project, and we're going to have to reset it sort of manually by manually running with a start button, right, with a play button, the workbook open event, because we don't want to close and open this project multiple times. So ideally, the first time the project is open, the connection is established. It does not get dropped until the project is closed, at which point the connection is also closed. That's again in an ideal circumstance. So next, we're going to right click on the loans code module to discuss the get customers standalone procedure, which essentially will, as I switch to the customer sheet, and I forgot to delete these guys, which then triggers select change event, will essentially insert these 10 full names of customers as well as their customer IDs in the hidden column B over here. Don't try not to click on the loans DB too much until we're done, because every time you do, as you've just noticed, it'll trigger selection change event, which has some code in it, which triggers those error messages that were popping up a second ago. So let's try to stick to this code module in this recording as much as we can. So the next step is to declare two variables. First, the SQL string variable will simply call both a local dim str customers as string, which is going to hold the SQL string that's going to retrieve the customer full name and their IDs, and then dim RST, which stands for record set customers, as new. Don't forget the word new, ADODB record set, not record set. Okay, the loans worksheet is already set, and then we're going to create a query string from scratch by coding it like this. SQL customers is, in double quotes, select statement, right? First we get cust ID, that's that 4 digits integer, and then we concatenate the full name out of the last name, and in single quotes, because double quotes are already used, comma, space, and first name as full name. So that's going to be the name of the column. So this record set will result in 10 rows, 2 columns, 1 column of customer IDs, 1 column of full names. Make sure you have a space at the end. And then next line, SQL customers continues, SQL customers, and to end this SQL statement, we have to specify where the data is coming from, which is the customers table. Okay, now when we run this record set with this query, when we open the record set, which is to say run the query, the major problems that can arise is from the SQL statements simply being incorrect. If that's the case, we're going to try to troubleshoot it. I'm pretty convinced, because this is a simple one, that it's not going to be an issue. Okay, so the first thing we do here is we open the record set. We already have the with statement set up, so we can use the open method and the SQL customers string as our data source, and then this workbook dot con loans as the connection, as the active connection, right? So it obviously has to be active, which right now it is not. I'll talk about it in just a second. So the loop has a standard, a looping through the record set, which we know will consist of 10 customers with those 2 columns of customer IDs and full names. What we're going to do is we're going to use a construct that we've talked about, perhaps in the intro programming class, which is the do while not end of file. But before that, we have to set the row count to 0, because we want to increment the counter to get to 10 customers, and we're going to set the top cell to the W loans DB, I think. Yeah, range, top left cell A1. Okay, so do while not dot end of file, and then you have to sort of close the loop here, right? Loops until, right, or while I should say, the end of file is not reached. Okay, and the key piece here, and I've mentioned it in the second sentence of this comment, okay, if you don't provide, after you process a record, if you don't provide dot move next, it's going to get stuck in the infinite loop at the first record until you run out of essentially memory, right, or overflow an integer or some such thing. In this case, it would be overflow an integer because row count is going to be incremented, row count with every pass through the loop. So if the loop becomes infinite because you forgot to move next, which tends to happen because it's not something you focus on, you're going to end up running out in about 32,000 integers, which is what the size of integer for VBA is. Then after you increment the counter to 1, we're going to use the top cell offset row count. So 1 with the processing on the first record, 0 columns, which means columns A is going to be set to dot fields. It's the collection of columns result of the record set, which we know are 2 of them. Full name, which is actually the second column from the SQL statement, and then copy, paste, change full name cust ID, which we know needs to go in the hidden column B, and that is actually the first column from the record set from the SQL statement. Once we're done going through all 10 customers, we are going to close the record set. So this is closing the record set, and then after the end with statement, columns collection column B dot entire column dot hidden is false. No drop downs, but it does work. Although it's already hidden, so it doesn't really matter as much, and we need those customer IDs later when we're processing individual orders for these, or loans I should say, for these customers. So the first thing we need to do is make sure that the connection is active, which if you switch to the lectures folder, you'll see it's not, because the only thing you see related to the Microsoft Access Loans database, it's the database itself. Once you activate it, which we'll do by switching to, so loan summary we no longer need, so I'm going to close that. I'm going to switch to this workbook code, and I'm going to force run the open workbook event, which would automatically run as soon as I open the workbook. So if I run it, you'll now notice if you switch back that the lock is inserted, which for us sort of signifies that the connection is active. Okay, and you'll get a lot of errors, or some errors. I'm sure I'm going to get one here. If I run it, yep, SQL variable not defined. SQL customers not defined. Oh, str customers. Okay, so the name of it. So I've got to end this. str customers 3 times here, rather than SQL customers. Either way I can use one or the other. It's just the name of a string variable. And now you'll notice this is a good example to make this mistake that a connection was dropped, because that locking file is gone. So I have to go back to this workbook, force run the open again to reestablish the connection, and then go back to this code and see what the next error holds. Still the same error as before. So I guess SQL customers is what I really wanted to have originally, to signify that this is SQL string. So let's rerun this. Okay. Oh, now no errors. So we should get these 10 customers. You can see that the column B is hidden here, and it does have the customer IDs for those 10 customers. Okay, so we're going to switch back to the presentation and pause.